All right, our time has begun. Again, for everyone who's just rolled in, this is the Past Business Intelligence Virtual Chapter, brought to you today by Pragmatic Works. I'd like to remind you, before I forget, Pragmatic Works is our sponsor, and they provide us with a prize of some sort, usually. I'm not sure what today's will be. But you will usually provide us a book or training or something of that nature. So your attendance today, in combination with completing the session survey at the end of our presentation, will automatically enter you for a chance to win whatever that prize is. Today we have Sam Venga with us, and he will be speaking on design patterns in SSIS. He's told me he has a full hour of content for us, so I am going to go through the community news for our chapter and for the past community on the whole very quickly here, and then I'll let him get underway. So obviously the big event for April is our Business Analytics Conference in Santa Clara, California. It's coming up next week. If you have not had a chance to register yet, be sure to use the registration savings code you see on your screen now to save $150 off the cost of registering for this conference. If you don't have a chance to write that down right now, feel free to look on our website for the past BI virtual chapter, and we will have it posted there as well. Also, I want to remind you about all of the different virtual chapters that PASS has now. We have something for every nook and cranny of the SQL world. Virtual chapters around the world on just about every topic imaginable. These were some of our select chapter meetings for the month of April, but as you can see, ours is the last one that has been highlighted, so hopefully you had a chance to catch all of these earlier in April. Also coming up in April, we have SQL Saturday events. These are great local events in North America and around the world. As you can see, we have a couple coming up here in the States as well as internationally. Be sure to check out the SQLSaturday.com website. It's recently had a refresh on the look, and there's a lot of new functionality and things to check out there. So if you haven't been in a while, stop over and have a look. Also, volunteering opportunities at PASS are everywhere. You can get involved with your virtual chapter or within your local community. Log on to the SQLPass.org website, and once you're logged in, check out the My Volunteering section to find out ways that you can get involved. And I have clicked the link. Sorry about that. Another great way to stay involved is to connect to us through social media. On LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, we're at SQLPass, as well as the SQLPass.org website. Finally, today's recording will be posted to our YouTube channel, which is PASS BI VC. We'll have it out there within the next week or so, but if you'd like to check it out right after this presentation, you can. There's over 30 hours of free learning on our topics of business intelligence through YouTube. So that's the end of my slide deck. I would like to turn things over to Sam right now. I'm going to shift over and make him our presenter. Are you ready to go, Sam?
Yes.
All righty. All righty. I see your screen.
Okay.
Very good.
Good.
All righty, sir. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Wes.
Sure.
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. If you are on the East Coast, as I am, otherwise good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. You have seen the session title. It's Automating SSIS Design Patterns for Faster Development. Okay. Sorry about that. Looks like my PowerPoint is stuck for a second. So a little bit about myself. My name is Samuel Wanga. I'm a database and business intelligence developer. My contact information is up here. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with me after the session. And obviously, if you have any questions regarding this session, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer them for you. And at the end of the session, I'll provide you a link where you can download all the code samples that I show in this presentation. I have one and only one goal for today's session. Wes, can you still see my screen?
I can see your screen, Sam. It looks like it just shifted from your introduction page to your session goal page.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, looks like it's some lag in between. So I have only one goal for today's session, and that is to give you a framework that you can use to automate your own SSIS design patterns. Now, the cool thing with SSIS and design patterns is that everybody can have different solutions to a same problem. It's great because everybody should use what works for them. So I won't try to force a design pattern onto you. I won't tell you that one is better than the other. But my focus in today's session is to show you a framework that you can use to automatically create the packages that match your criteria. And today's content includes the why do we need to automate SSIS development, and then the how to automate SSIS packages. And here is where I talk about BIML and BIML script. I'll go into more details later. And then lastly, I'll give you the framework that I call DMOP. I'll talk about it in more detail towards the end of the session. So here is what you'll need for this session. BIML doesn't come with Visual Studio. You'll have to download a plugin from BitsHelper, which you can get from bitshelper.codeplex.com. It is completely free to use. All of the code examples that I'm going to show you today, you can use it without purchasing anything. So I'm not trying to sell you anything. And obviously you also need to have SSIS experience. BIML is not an alternative to SSIS. In some of the presentations I've done in the past, people tend to confuse that if we start using BIML or learn BIML, then we can get rid of SSIS. That's not the case. BIML allows you to create the packages automatically instead of creating them manually. So remember, BIML is not an alternative to SSIS. So I'll begin by telling you a story which I have experienced more often than not, and hopefully you have experienced it as well. And it goes like this. Joe is a manager at a health insurance company. And then Joe started working on an ETL project. He gets data from different sources, and his job is to integrate the data from all those different sources into a single data store. So Joe gathers his team of developers, and they together analyze the requirements, design the solution, and then come up with an estimate of, say, 2 months. But after 2 months, the developers realized that they missed some key functionality in the SSIS packages. Maybe they forgot to add some logging or some auditing functionalities that really have to be there. So they asked for more time to make those changes. Let's say 1 more month. Now, 3 months go by. it's all good now. So testers start testing and they find more bugs in it. Maybe some of the key fields are missing, some of the fields did not come through the data sources, something like that. Now for the developers to include all those things, they ask for more time again, and this time they ask for 1 more month. Now we are into 4 months now, but the initial estimate is only 2 months. Still the project is nowhere being completed. You know, I can go on like this, but the point is creating SSIS packages manually the way we do is time consuming. In fact, it's generally agreed that 80% of the cost for a BI project or an ETL project can be associated with ETL development alone. And if you think about it, the real problem is with how we meaning me, you, and Joe's team, how we create SSIS packages. Typically, SSIS, like any software development, goes through a life cycle. We have a few stages that we go through, and you know, in the design phase, we come up with a solution to create so and so number of packages to handle different tasks. Maybe you would need packages for all the stage loads, or maybe you need packages for the dimension loads, or maybe you need to do incremental loads, delta loads, or whatever. The first thing you would do is you design the entire solution in terms of packages. Now after design, and actually in the design phase is where a lot of creativity goes into, a lot of testing, a lot of you know, back and forth, throwing out ideas and see what works and what doesn't work. You do all those of things in the design phase. And once the design phase is done, in the development phase, we use Visual Studio to create the packages. And by use Visual Studio, I mean we create the packages by hand. We drag and drop items from the toolbox into the control flow or the data flow area, and we repeat those steps for several hours and several amount of times to complete creating the packages. That's obviously time consuming. And the worst part is it does not take, or it does not handle changes well. If something changes, your package will break. Something meaning if a new column is added in the source or a data type is changed, your package will break with metadata errors. So you have to recreate the package manually again, fixing all those things. So obviously all this takes time. The solution to this is to automate the development of the packages. The single most reason or the benefit of automating SSIS development or anything in general is efficiency. You can be efficient, you can be quick, and you can automatically create all the packages you need. Not only that, you can automatically regenerate the packages if things change. And this is where BIML comes into play. And BIML stands for Business Intelligence Markup Language. So this is what I'm going to show in this session now. Now, enough of me talking. I'll jump straight away into Visual Studio and show what BIML really is. So I have Visual Studio open here, and I have already installed Bits Helper in here. So after installing Bits Helper, if I right click on SSIS packages, I'll be able to see an option called Add New BIML File. So when I right click on Add New BIML File, a new file will be added here. It's named bimlscript.biml. So when I double click the file to open, I can see the root element here. So I can straight away tell that this is nothing but XML, and I would be right because BIML is based on XML. And like XML, everything in BIML begins and ends with tags. So to start with, I'll start typing the bracket here, and then intelligence kicks in. I want to create a simple package here just to see what this thing is. So, packages, for packages, I'll simply start typing P. And as soon as I type P, I can see the intelligence kicks in and it's giving me the list of available options. And right now, to create a packages, looks like I have to select packages first. And next to packages, it also tells you what that is. So it basically is a collection of integration services packages. And that's what I want. So I will again type packages, and after closing it, it will automatically complete the closing tag as well. I did not type the closing tag here. BIM will automatically close that for me. So this is all good. Intelligence is built in, and then it looks like XML. So XML has all these tags and all. So within the packages elements, I'll again start with an open bracket here, and then again intelligence kicks in and tells me that package is allowed here. So I'll enter package, and then as soon as I hit package, I see red squiggly braces here, which means it's telling me that something is wrong. So let's place our cursor here and see what's going on. It says tag was not closed. Okay, so I'll close the tag now, and then the red line is now changed to a blue one. Now it says required attribute constraint mode is missing. So looks like whatever this is, the attribute, that's a required one. So I'll continue typing here. I'll find constraint mode again using the intelligence, and then the list of accepted values also pops up. I'll select linear. Still there is a blue line here, and this time it's saying that the attribute name is missing. Obviously a package needs a name, so I'll type in name and give a name here. I'll say simple package. So this is a very simple BIML here where we defined only a package element. Now I have used two new words now. I've said element and then I said attribute. So basically an element is, it defines the property. So for example, in Visual Studio, when you drag and drop things from the toolbox, all those are elements. Packages, execute SQL task, transformations, all those things would be elements. And then attribute define the element. So think of attributes as properties. For a package, there has to be a name, there has to be a constraint mode. Similarly, for an execute SQL task, there has to be a connection name, there has to be a SQL statement. So those all would be the attributes. So that's it. The BIML is really simple. So to create a simple package, all I did is I wrote some XML with just a package element in here. Now if I want to add more tasks in here, I'll do it in between the open and close package tag here. So I'll start tasks, and then within tasks, if I want to create an execute SQL task, here is the execute SQL task. I'll say name, and then let's just give a name here, EST, and then I can say connection name. Now I have not defined any connection yet, so this will not work, but this is how you start BIML. Now just for the sake of an example, I'll create a data flow task now. It does not require any connections. So data flow, and then I give a name, I'll just say DFT and the close bracket. So this is a very simple package. It just contains one data flow task. So right after completing the BIML here, I can right click in the Solution Explorer and I can check for errors. No errors were found. So this is good. Now to create the package, I'll now right click and say generate SSIS packages. So as you can see in the Solution Explorer here, it created the package. It has the name that is same as the one that we gave, simple package. I'm not even going to open that. Let me delete it. I don't need that anymore. So this is how you write BIML. Now, honestly, this doesn't give me any benefits, does it? Instead of using the Visual Studio and the drag drop interface, I'm writing a bunch of XML code here. So what problem is it really solving? So that's where BIML script comes into play. You can basically write C# or VB.NET code nuggets inside BIML to extend BIML and automate the creation of packages. For example, let's say you want to pass this name from a variable. Instead of giving a static value simple package, I'll declare a variable and then I'll use the value of that variable in the name here. I know it's a meaningless example, but this is a basic example that will help you understand some of the future or some of the later concepts. So to declare a variable at the start of the BIML file, I'll start with an open angle bracket and a pound sign and close it with a pound sign and a closing angle bracket. Now any C# or VB code that you write inside BIML, in other words any BIML script that you write, should be in between these brackets. So you also notice that as soon as I started typing those pound signs and the angle brackets, you notice the red squiggly underlines at the bottom there. That's because Visual Studio Interface understands XML. So it understands BIML and it knows how to format it. But it does not understand BIML script. So it don't know what to do with it. And so it cannot format or it cannot display properly. And this is one of the, I'll say, drawbacks, but it's not that huge of a problem as you get used to it. So let me zoom in this a little bit. So now inside this one, I'll now declare a variable. I'll say string pkg name for package name equal to, I'll say new package. Now what I'll do is I'll use the variable pkg name as the name of the package instead of the static value simple package. So to do that, I will again use this open angle bracket and the pound sign, and this time I'll use an equal operator and I'll copy the package name variable from here. So again, nothing complicated. I've declared a variable, string is the data type, and then this is the variable name, and new package is the value. And here in the package name attribute, I'm passing pkg name. Now notice two things. One is this one, just an open angle bracket and the pound sign, and the second one is the equal to operator. We'll come back to this one, but just keep a note of it. Now remember I deleted our earlier simple package. Now when I right click and generate the package here, it will create a package with name new package. So this is our first look at BIML script. Again, I'll delete the new package. That's not very important right now. Now let's say we want to create 5 packages. What we can do is we can write a for loop. So it begins like this. I want to create 5 packages. So what I'll do is in front of the package tag, I'll again start the required open angle bracket and the pound, and it needs a ending pound and the closing bracket. So in between that, I'll say for int is the data type, I equal to 1, and since it's an integer, I don't need those double quotes. I'll say I less than equal to 5 and the increment I plus plus. So as long as this for loop satisfies, I want this piece of the code to be executed in a loop. And since I want 5 packages to be created, I have a value 5 here. And after the package closing tag, I'll close my for loop with this. Okay? So now if I right click here, it will throw an error, and I'm intentionally letting that error pop up to show you one thing. I will check for BIML for errors. So as you can see, it errored and it says the new package name is repeated within the scope. So what's this telling is, it's telling two things. One, our for loop worked. So the loop really worked. But then the second thing is, every time the loop ran, it's using the same value for the name attribute. Because every time it runs, it's getting the value from pkg name, which is new package, and it's trying to name all packages as new package, and it will fail for obvious reasons. So what I can do again is change the name in here, and again I'll use an expression, and this time it's I. So I'm appending the value of I to new package each time it runs, so it gets a new name. Now this time when I generate packages here, oops, sorry, my bad. Okay, so every open bracket needs a close bracket, so I was missing the closing a pound sign before the close here, so that was the error. So right click, generate SSIS packages, and now you can see all the different packages being created. Again, this is very simple. We have created a simple blank package. But think about it for a second. If I can write simple for loops and maybe for each loops, which we'll see later, and let it generate packages, multiple packages dynamically. Now if I can expand my code in here, the actual package logic with all the tasks, transformations, and everything I need, then it should theoretically create all the packages that I need, right? So that's the whole point. Now similar to a for loop, there is also a for each loop, which is very commonly used. And there are two versions of for each loop. The first version is, and I'll stop typing, I have already created the BIML file for that, and I'll walk through that file. And before that, let me delete these packages. So now I have a for each loop.biml file here, and I'm double clicking it, and notice that it opened it as a text file. There is no intelligence, there is not even those red or blue squiggly lines there. Like I said, Visual Studio does not clearly understand how to deal with BIML script, so it treats it as text as soon as it sees the BIML script at the beginning of this file. So here for a for each loop, here is my for each loop, the beginning, and then the end is here. Again, I am creating multiple packages. But this time what I was doing is I'm getting metadata from SQL tables. So I have a query here which basically returns the list of files that I need to import. In this case, there are 3 files, and if I wanted to create a package for each of the file that's in this table, I can first import a namespace here, and then I declare the ETL metadata. It's basically a connection string to my database, and then get files is a query, a select statement, and I declare a data table which executes the external data access.get data table method, and it goes to the ETL metadata connection and runs this query. And in the for each, it's almost similar to the for loop. We say for each data row in files.rows, again the open, and the results will be passed into an array here. So I said load file of 0, which means the first value of that table result set. Okay. So at this point, let me pause and see if there are any questions. Wes, are there any questions?
We did have one question from Ian.
Okay.
He had asked about creating BIML scripts directly from existing packages.
Yes, so that's a good question, and the answer is the bits helper, the version that comes with bits helper does not allow you to do that. But if you purchase a commercial version, then you can do that. You can basically import the existing package and reverse engineer BIML script from that.
Okay, I think that's what he was looking for. Thanks.
No problem.
So I think that's all we have as far as questions right now. So.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
So,
I'm sorry. I did just get another one pop in if you could have.
okay.
Can you post the URL download to Bids Helper again? And I can answer that for Sam. He said at the end of his presentation, you have all the links and the slide deck, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and also we have another question. Can any kind of C# code exist within the tags?
Yes, that's correct. Any kind of C# or VB, yes.
Okay. Okay, so.
Okay, so
Yeah, you're fine. That's the last one we'll take. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to post them, and we'll catch back up in just a few minutes.
okay, thank you. So this is how a for each loop can be executed. Now there is another way of running for each loops, and you would need both of them, as I'll show in a full-blown example coming up. You'll use both kinds of for each loops. The first one which we just saw is when the metadata, when you store the metadata in an external location like a SQL Server table or flat files or even Excel files, you can create a data table and run a for each loop for each row in that data table. Now the next type we're going to see is, let me come back to our previous BIML script example. I don't like the notepad thing, so what I'm going to do is I'll right click here and I'll say open with, and I'll force it to use XML text editor, so it will show me it in a colored font. So without repeating what I have already said, this package, this BIML file we just created, creates 5 packages. Now what I want to do is I want to create a parent package to execute these child packages. It's a very common design pattern. You will have multiple packages called the child packages doing its thing, and then there will be a parent package which will execute the child packages, maybe sequentially or parallel or maybe some other control logic. So what I'm going to do is I will right click and add a new BIML file. I'll rename it to parent, and inside parent I'll start by typing I want to create a package name parent, and then constraint mode is mandatory. I'll also give the production level, and I'll type tasks, and to to execute child packages, I need an execute package task. So from IntelliSense, I'll pick up the execute package here. I'll give it a name. I'll just say EPT and I'll close it. And inside the execute package element, I'll say package and I'll give the package name. I'll just put A for now. Now, if I run this one, it basically creates a package called parent with one task in it, and the task would be named EPT, and then the execute package task would be pointing to a package called A, but there is no package named A, so this will fail basically. And also I want to change this too. I want to call the child packages and name it accordingly. So what I'll use this time is excuse me. So after tasks, I want one execute package task for each child packages. And remember, there are 5 child packages in our previous script. So I'll again begin our BIML script. I'll say for each var package okay, so I started the for each loop here and I'll end that loop here. Okay, so what did I do here? I'm not going over the for each loop because we already did. It's basically starting a for each loop and then ending the for each loop. But the interesting thing I have done here is I have declared a root node method. I'm using the root node method here. So root node method is a very key functionality in BIML script, and root node is basically a collection of all the objects, all the logical objects, and it's a BIML representation of all the logical objects. It will let you access all the objects from any number of BIML files. So when I said root node dot packages, and when I select, let's say, 2 BIML files here, it will gather all the collections, all the logical objects from these 2 files, and it will create a representation of each of the collections. And then here in the name I'll say EPT underscore, again my braces and the pound symbol, pkg dot name. And similarly here I'll again use the same thing. Okay, so root node is basically a BIML representation of all objects from the selected BIML files. Now another thing I'm going to do here is I will introduce a directive. So when I execute, if I execute this parent package now, it will fail because there are no references to these packages here. All the references are in the other BIML file, in this file. So what I need to do is I have to tell BIML to use the files in a sequential order when there are multiple files. So to tell BIML what to do, I'll use what's called a directive. In this case it's template I'll copy paste here 1. So I have used what's called a directive here, telling BIML to use the BIML script.biml file first and then use the parent.biml file next. And also I have used the root node collection to loop over each package and create an execute package task for each of the packages. Now I will select these 2 and right click and generate SSIS packages. See, it has created the 5 packages I need, and then it has also created the parent package. Now if I open the parent package, I can see all the packages listed here and they are all connected here. Okay, so let's jump back to slides here for a second and let's do a recap of what we have learned. Let me try the PowerPoint one more time, and if it doesn't, I will quit using it. Okay. There you go. Okay. So we have looked at BIML first. BIML stands for Business Intelligence Markup Language, and it's basically human readable, meaning that you can look at it and figure out what's going on. If you look at a tag called packages or a tag called execute SQL task, you know what it's doing. It's easy to read, and then it's declarative. You tell it what to do instead of being a procedural language. And if there is anything that you can do in SSDT or bits, you can do it with BIML, meaning all tasks, all configurations, packages, properties, everything. They have not left out anything. So any single property that you can configure inside the graphical interface, you can do it with BIML as well. And then finally, it's an XML based markup language. We have seen XML has tags, and similarly BIML also has tags. And this image at the bottom, it's from an article that Reeve Smith wrote on SQLServerCentral.com, and it clearly explains what are the different tags and all. So at the top you have a start tag, packages, and then you have an end tag, and then you have what's called elements and attributes. Again, if you want to remember it easily, any item from the toolbox would be an element in BIML, and then any property that you can configure would be an attribute in BIML. And then we talked about BIML script. Now honestly, like I said, BIML alone doesn't do the job. Instead of creating the package using the GUI, BIML is asking you to write a lot of XML code, and then it's making you type a lot of code, which definitely is not efficient. But what brings the magic is BIML script. You can write C# or VB code nuggets to extend BIML, and then as we have seen, code goes into this open angle bracket, pound, and then pound, close angle bracket. Now the real power with BIML script is, since you can write C# code, you can basically store metadata anywhere you want, and then write code to read the metadata, and then also loop through multiple objects within BIML, and then create all those packages you need automatically. And if something changes, you can update the metadata and then regenerate the packages. So this is a simple BIML script control blocks, and this is from an example we have seen, the for loop. BIML script contains BIML first of all. So all the code that you see here that is not in the rectangle boxes is basically BIML code, the package name, constraint mode, all of this. So BIML script, in addition to containing BIML, which is called a text block, also contains two other parts. One is called a directive. You can see it at the top here. I'm using a template directive. So directives tell BIML what to do with the files and how to generate the BIML code. And then the green color box here that you're seeing on the screen, it's a standard control block, and it begins with an angle bracket and the pound sign. And directives begin with angle bracket, pound sign, and then @ symbol. So standard block is basically where your logic goes. It will be expanded as the loop runs. Now finally, the expression control block, that's what evaluates the expression and converts the value into a string and passes it on to BIML. So for example, in the first example, when we used a variable to give a package name, the expression evaluated the value from that variable and passed it to a string. In this case, the value of I is being replaced each time the loop runs. So that's the expression control block. And the last slide before going into the full demo is how does BIML really work? So when I or you write code in Bits Helper, and when you say generate packages, what happens is the code passes through to a BIML engine, and then it compiles the code and generates the SSIS packages we need. It can also create database schema, T-SQL or stored, T-SQL SQL Server tables if you want, as we'll see in the next example. Okay, so finally, and I think it's a good time to pause again as well. Wes, do we have any other questions?
I'm sorry, we do have a couple questions, and I didn't realize I was muted there. So I'll let you try to field a couple of these, and if it cuts too close to your time, we have about 15 minutes left. Feel free to stop, and then we'll try to pick those up later, or I can forward the questions to you after the presentation, Sam, and you can answer them offline. So our first question is, what code or keyword does BIML use to indicate whether we're using VB.NET or C#?
Right, so that's a good question. You can use a template directive at the top of your BIML code and say template space language equal to C# or VB. But here is the good thing. You don't have to do that. Based on what you write, BIML engine will automatically figure out what you used. So if you look at my examples here, I did not specify C# or VB. I'm letting the BIML engine do that.
That's great. Okay, the next question is there a way to create BIML packages without manually writing the XML?
With the free version that comes with Bits Helper, the answer is no.
Okay. Next is, does IntelliSense pick up third-party transform, and can we configure any tasks as we would from the Visual Studio Designer?
I don't know the answer to that right now. I think it picks up some of them. I don't know if it picks up all third-party components.
Okay.
I can find that out for whoever is asking.
Okay. Next we have, can we loop through the existing packages and modify them as, for example, adding an execute sol task at the beginning, end, or anywhere within the package?
I'm not sure if I understood that question. Maybe
Are you able to see the question section within the navigation there of the webinar?
I don't.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we have a few more beyond that. Why don't you pick up your presentation, and I will forward the rest of the questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay. Yes, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so we have talked about BIML and BIML script so far. But let's bring all of them together and let's see what I mean by demob. So for this demo, what I'll do is I'll pick a problem, which is basically staging the delimited files. And let's see how I create the packages automatically to load all those files into their respective staging tables. So for this particular problem, I also saved a few files from baltimorect.gov, and it basically is the data about fixed speed cameras and the red light cameras and all, who loves paying parking tickets and fines, right? And also just an FYI, when I started playing with this data, I live in Baltimore, by the way. I live and work in Baltimore, and traffic is horrible here. So, and And also when I started playing with this data back in 2013, I think, the Baltimore City temporarily suspended all their red light cameras and all. Not that I can take credit for it, but you know, that's what happened. So for the staging files, this is the pattern that I'm going to use. In data flow, I'll simply read data from the flat files, and after reading the data, most of the time the fields are, all fields are string. But if there is some data like salary or sales or street number and things like that, that's integer data. So if we convert that into integer or date, for example, it saves a lot of storage instead of saving it as varchar or unvarchar. So for that reason, I'm also doing a data conversion transformation, and finally I'm writing it into the destination. And in the control flow, since it's a staging table, before loading a file, I want to truncate everything in there and load and do a full load each time. So this is my design pattern. And let me tell you, this is not the design pattern. This is not an universal pattern. Maybe you might have different solution to this problem, which is absolutely okay. But what I'm saying is, this is how I'm going to load my flat files in this case. So the BIML representation, I'm really sorry guys, for some reason the PowerPoint doesn't work well if I do a full screen, so hopefully you can see this. This is the BIML representation of the packages that I shown earlier, the data flow and the control flow. Let's do a zoom it here. So first you will see the flat file formats. For a flat file connection, you would need a flat file format. So I typed BIML for that, and then you would need connections, one for the flat file connection and one for the OLEDB connection. And then here is my package element, and inside the package here is my execute SQL for the truncate table, and then here is my data flow task, the transformations, data conversion, and finally the OLEDB destination. Now when I try to automate anything using BIML, I like to first write plain BIML for that, because that allows me to identify all the attributes that I need. And then after design, the M part in my DMOB, which is metadata. You can basically store metadata anywhere you want, depending on your C# or VB.NET skills. You can store them in SQL tables, extended properties, Excel file, CSV file, anywhere you want. And then you can query them and pull that into BIML. In this case, I have stored them in SQL Server tables. As you can see at the bottom, I have two user-defined functions, which basically give me the list of files and also the file formats. So I store everything that I need to create an SSIS package in SQL tables here. And the next is objects. I've talked about the root node collection. If you try to import everything, even if you don't want to create the tables using BIML, you can still import them. And what that gives you is, it allows you to use some of the special methods from within BIML. In this example, I have the file formats, objects collection, and the tables collection that I am going to heavily use. And finally, BIML script itself. So this is what I mean by DMOB. It's basically a mindset to use all the scripts to automate whatever you want. Now let's jump to Visual Studio and delete all of this from here, and I won't be typing anymore. I will add the files that I have already created. Okay, so first I'll go over the environment file. Okay, So as you can see, I have broken down my code into multiple files here. So all the files here will do the job I want. So I'm in the first line, I'm using a template directive to tell BIML compiler or the BIML engine to use this file or to compile this file first, and all the later files will use the results or the objects from this particular file. And if you see here, I have also separated out all the connection strings and all the metadata, all the database and the flat file connections into here. The benefit of this is, if I give all the files to you guys, you don't have to change anything. All you need to do is change the value for these variables to point to your locations, and everything should work fine. I think it makes it very easy. And the next one I want to show is the file formats. So in the file formats, again, first I'm using a directive here, and this time I'm including the environment.biml file. Because I stored all my variables and the connection strings in the environment file, I want to include it here. So you don't have to repeat all the variables and all the connection string multiple times. You can simply add a line here saying include file and the environment.biml file. And then again the template tile saying that this is the next file that needs to be compiled. And then I'm again using an import directive to import the system.data. Now I don't have to go through each and every line here, because the reason is simple. Remember the for each loop and the two types of for each loops I showed, using from an external data table and from the root node table. If you understand that, I've used the same concepts in here. So for example, here to create the flat file formats, this section is the meat of it, the flat file format, name and the columns. And here I am querying the external data access to get all the results from my ETL metadata table. Remember, I stored my metadata in tables and I've created functions to pull the data. So after defining the file formats, I am creating connections in an additional file. Again, it's the same thing. If I go over this, it would be simply repeating, and this is the awesome thing about BIML script. You simply have to learn maybe one or two things, and even without a lot of C# experience, you can write awesome code and create a lot of solutions. So here I have created my OLEDB connection and the flat file connection here. So after connections, I have defined the objects here. So defining objects, I have specified the database name, the schema name and all, and then in tables I have defined what is the table name and what is the schema name, and notice all the expression control blocks and the for loops again. And finally, or one file before the final file, I'm creating the objects. Now if I go back here into my SSIS patterns database, which I use as a staging, I have, oops, okay, no mind. So instead of creating the tables manually in Management Studio, I'll create them here itself. BIML allows you to do that, so you can automate that piece also. So what I'm going to do is, I'll select this portion of it and right click and say generate SSIS packages. So it created an SSIS package called create objects, and each of it is an execute SQL task running a SQL statement to create the table. Here is the create table statement. So if I execute this one, it will drop and recreate the tables. It succeeded. So one piece I want to show is in the create objects BIML file. This is the method that generates SQL statement. You don't even have to write SQL for that. There is a BIML function for that. table.getTableSQL. And lastly, in the packages BIML file, I have all my tasks. Here is the execute SQL for truncate statement, and here is the data flow transformation source, and then the data conversion transformation, and lastly the OLEDB destination. It's the same thing. We are simply reusing what we have seen in the for each loop example. And in this case, I'm even using the root node collection. So now I will select all of them, right click, and then say generate SSIS packages. It will warn me about an existing package, create objects. I'll say overwrite it, yes to all, and notice that the 3 packages that I need are already created. It was like in a second or so. I can even open this one, and this is the package that exactly matches my pattern. I want a truncate statement, a data flow task, and in the data flow task I want the source, data conversion, and then the OLEDB destination. You can test it by running it here, and it all succeeds completely. And coming back to Management Studio, I can do a select statement and review the results. So this all worked fine. So creating the BIML scripts, I haven't really shown these scripts in full depth here since we are running out of time. But once I give you these scripts, you'll notice that whatever you're seeing here, we have already seen everything in the for each loop example. So this is what we covered. We talked about the need for automating SSIS development, and then we have seen the basics of BIML and then BIML script, and the framework that you can use to automate your development. The design pattern, you have got to have a design pattern, and then store metadata somewhere that you can access from within BIML, and the BIML representation of the objects, so you can use the root node. And that's all I have. And the link that you can download the slides from is samuelvanga.com/go/automate SSIS. If you go there, you can get all the code examples that I've shown here.
That's fantastic, Sam. Thanks for your presentation. If you would like, I can send you the rest of those questions that we were unable to get to during your presentation.
Yes, please. Yes.
I will be sure to send those along to you. So finally, I will take over being the presenter again and remind you all that our presentation today was brought to you by Pragmatic Works. After the presentation, please make sure to complete the survey, and we will get you entered to win something wonderful from the folks at Pragmatic Works, always something interesting and useful to us. Again, thank you, Sam Venga, for your presentation, and look for this recording on our YouTube channel in the next week or so. Thanks again, everyone.